Hello and welcome to day 2 of RSAC conference here at Broadcast Alley. I'm Jen English with Informa Tech Target and Ion Tech. If you missed our last conversation, I spoke with Michael Rotamo about cloud security, and now we're going to be shifting gears to security for critical infrastructure, and I have with me Hollie Hennessey from Omdia, and you are a principal analyst. And yeah, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So first, could you tell me a little bit about your background and your expertise in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I have a bit of a unconventional background, I guess. So I actually studied archaeology and ancient philosophy at university, so way different from the furthest thing from security and technology, right? Thousands of years ago. Yep. So that's kind of how I studied at university. I've always been in a research kind of mindset, kind of an analytical mindset. So there's a link there, and there's an ethics angle, so there's some coverage there. But essentially, yeah, I went into a couple of different research roles. I've always been in research. And then I went into a company called Which in the UK. So it's the largest consumer organization in the UK. It's a not-for-profit. Has a lot of influence in UK government and things like that. It's essentially the UK version of Consumer Reports in the US. So I worked there on the product testing team. So I used to run all the tests for consumer IoT. So I used to do that and wireless routers and those kind of devices. So just happened to kind of be put on that area. So I led those devices, designed the test programs, and this was like for performance predominantly first. But then we started to think, okay, well, if we're recommending products, we need to also be looking at the security of these products. So that kind of, we started to get more interest on that, and could be asked about that by consumers in the UK, and not just in the UK, but globally as well. It was a big issue that was cropping up. We're seeing more about vulnerabilities in connected devices. So we thought, okay, we need to roll out some security testing. Yeah, one of my colleagues asked if I wanted to help with that, if I was interested in that, and I started doing that. Found it incredibly interesting. Obviously, it was really applicable to the smart home kind of area, and also wireless routers as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into the security space, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought, I enjoy this more than like the performance of devices. Yeah, and then this job came up, and I thought, okay, it's still IoT, but not really heavily on the consumer side anymore. It's still close to my heart. Like I do. I want the best for consumers when it comes to cybersecurity. I think there's been so much improvement even from when I was looking at that. But I'm much more enterprise focused now in my research and understanding how organizations can secure the IoT that they have in their environments, and that's expanded into operational technology as well. So obviously before I was very focused on your smart cameras and the things you might have in your home. It's a whole different world in like the industrial space, right? These devices are, critical and hugely, basically running the kind of societies that we have and functioning of our societies. So yeah, it's super interesting. I really like this area. Yeah, I think this has such a nice kind of impact as well when you're talking about securing these environments. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. It's a big pivot, but yeah, no, I love it. I've been in this role for a while now, so yeah.
So you touched on it, but what are some of the major differences between, enterprise IT with, cybersecurity with OT, IoT, cybersecurity?
Yeah, and I think it is different. On the IT side, it's mature. A lot of the vendors here are going to be IT security vendors. It's very well developed. I think that one of the main differences is the device itself, right? So if you're looking at IoT and OT, it has such a different impact on the physical world, right? So you're thinking about that physical element of it. And a lot of people classify IoT and OT in cyber physical systems, and I think thinking about that physical element is really key. So your priorities are going to be completely different. If something happens, there's a cybersecurity incident, and there's downtime with a critical device, and it has a physical process. It could be in healthcare, it could be in a manufacturing plant, it could be in other areas of critical infrastructure. That kind of impact is vastly different. So you're kind of bearing in mind that that's the lens in which you look through everything. If you think of enterprise IT, you're very concerned with protecting the digital information. And that's still a concern in the OT space. Obviously, there's a lot of data that's involved in processes. Obviously, links between IT and OT and personal information that can kind of, if you're thinking of lateral movement, getting to the IT side of things. So these are considerations, but you're really thinking about the availability of devices, the safety of devices, how reliable the devices are. So it's very device-centric. Yeah, so that it's kind of like that lens is the way I kind of like to look at it and talk about it. So
nice. And so in the vertical industries, right? How much do skills, policies, and regulations vary with IT and IoT and OT?
Yeah, for sure. And I think things are different. There are some regulations. You're looking at critical infrastructure as a whole. IT is covered and OT is covered, and we're seeing so much more in that. If you think back to just 2018-ish is when really this kind of exacerbated for IoT security, and this is kind of really progressed. Like the UK has the PSDI Act to ensure better security for devices. We have the Cyber Resilience Act in the EU coming up. There's a lots of different things that are going on recently in just the last few years, so it's really rapidly accelerating. And then on the critical infrastructure side, there's things like NIS2. There's already some established regulations for particular industries, but that's kind of happening at this point in time. There's a lot of requirements for both IT and OT, but when you're thinking of critical infrastructure organizations who have to adhere to these, they need to be thinking about that whole environment. So it's not just the IT side of the house, it's really securing those OT devices as well, making sure that's factored in. I think in regulation, sometimes that is explicitly spelled out, and sometimes it's not. So it can be really difficult for organizations actually to understand that regulatory point of view. It's something that I do heavily kind of look at. And on the other hand, as I mentioned with the kind of product security side of things and actually making sure these devices are secure by design, another thing to think about is, okay, the devices that I'm deploying in the environment, that they meeting kind of my expectations. And hopefully these regulations that are coming out on the product security side also kind of allow consumers, whether they're a consumer like you and I, or a consumer, as an organization who are purchasing these devices. So hopefully that empowers them to be able to make those buying decisions better. But at the same time, they have to consider all of these devices in their environment and look to securing them. And it can be a challenge, for sure.
And that was going to be my next question, right? Like, what are the major challenges for these IoT and OT environments?
Yeah, and I think one of the key ones is in IT, as I mentioned, is even the technology is more mature, the market's more mature, but the organizations tend to be more mature in their IT security strategy as well. If you think of like a lot of critical infrastructure organizations, they're going through a period of change. They're going through a period of digital transformation, right? So they haven't ordinarily been used to securing these environments or thinking about security in a way because the connectivity is coming in and they're now having to do so different to they did before. So there's this kind of learning curve, there's this journey. So there's a lot of basic cybersecurity hygiene that hasn't actually been deployed in OT environments. So many are at early stages. Not everybody, like the market is maturing now to meet the needs of more mature customers, and it's kind of just getting to that point. It's difficult. The devices themselves, there's a huge amount of legacy devices. You can't use the same technology that you have in IT, in OT environments. Like there needs to be specialization to some extent. Some things cross over. There's definitely learnings you can take from IT and kind of bring that into OT, for sure. But it's a super different challenge. The devices are different. The maturity level's different. There's less time than that they've had to kind of develop these strategies in the grand scheme of things. So I think that's definitely one of them. The other one is around skills. So you take manufacturing as an example, it's kind of an aging workforce. Younger people aren't going into those industries as much. So they have that paired with the cybersecurity skills issues. So there's kind of like this dual aspect on the skills side. The other thing, if you're thinking who is responsible for OT security within the organization, some organizations have that as a dedicated role and they have someone who's specialized in that sense. Or it could be that the CISO is now responsible for OT and IT. It could be an IT security professional who's then being told to take on that as part of their remit. It could be an operations manager. So there's a kind of a difference as well on the level of expertise within the organization, and especially navigating all these complex regulatory requirements, the intricacies of the devices. It can be really difficult.
So on top of that, what kind of budgets do the enterprise teams have to work with these environments?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. It's one that kind of crops up quite a lot in these conversations, I think. And that we actually find, I did this research last year and essentially asked about budgets for OT security in comparison with the total cybersecurity budget. And we find that there's a very small amount of organizations who are spending less than 5%. So that's kind of a good thing. But in the same vein, there's actually the bulk of organizations are spending less than 50%. So there's not that many that are spending more than 50% of their budgets. And if you're a critical infrastructure organization and you need to secure both IT and OT, you need that investment, especially if you're at an earlier stage of your journey, right? So it's kind of moving towards a point where there is more investment in OT security and navigating those challenges. And there's a lot of struggle that cost is the biggest issue when I run my surveys and I, speak to end customers. When they're purchasing IoT and OT security, so both sides, it's the number one issue. So it's the biggest barrier that they see. So it's kind of understanding how can you showcase this to the board, or wherever you're getting your budget from, or if you're taking it from a different area of the business, how can you showcase that this is going to be a useful spend? And it's interesting because it's difficult with cybersecurity in general to say, okay, this is the ROI. Yeah. It's really difficult. So in the operational space, operational environments, it's kind of looking at how the technology out there specialized for these environments can aid the business, right? How can they reduce risk? How are they going to be able to help with other things, peripheral things? It might be predictive maintenance. It might be understanding anomalies in processes. Still thinking about that kind of safety, reliability, availability of those critical assets and devices. So there are ways around it, and we're kind of, seeing more, a focus on OT, which is nice. So it's not all bad, but there could be more spend, and it's definitely a challenge.
So what are some of the emerging technologies that are really becoming relevant in the IoT and OT security environments?
Yeah, and I think there is quite a lot. If you look at the OT cybersecurity market, before it was very heavy on kind of visibility, and that's still super important. But it's really developed now. A lot of the technology has so many more capabilities. So we're seeing a lot more focus on proactive cybersecurity capabilities in the IT security space, but it's really trickled into the OT security space as well. So understanding the environment, the devices within it, what vulnerabilities actually mean to that individual environment, and then how can you prevent things from happening, right? So even on the predictive side, we're seeing a lot more. So being able to understand what may happen or what vulnerability may turn into something that you need to care about. And there's a lot of things that kind of, spur this along. I mean, obviously AI is a huge topic. Everybody's speaking about it. AI has been in cybersecurity for a long time, as everybody knows in the industry. But this is kind of really helping make sense of that data, being able to kind of add that additional level of, prediction, which can kind of help improve cybersecurity posture. And arguably be, a really good way to kind of focus strategy. On the other hand, you have kind of AI-driven technologies which are aiding with the skills gap type of issues. So helping whoever's utilizing these like SecOps tools to understand what they should focus on to make use of it without potentially necessarily having the skills. And in the OT space, as I mentioned, that's already kind of an issue. So it can be really useful. One of the other things that kind of see quite a lot are more of the modern secure remote access solutions. So, as we spoke about digital transformation in OT environments or industrial environments, and that's been happening for a while now. You have a lot of people remoting in into the environment. So there's a lot of new solutions now which are tailored towards that. I see there's a really fast growing area, and tying back to the regulatory piece as well, that's a requirement in the regulation too, so to have your access control now down. So there's a lot of interesting things. Keeps my my life busy.
Yeah. So probably AI will be in this answer, but what trends are you seeing in your coverage area here?
Yeah. So for sure, I mean, AI is one of them in security in general. I would say everybody in the IoT and OT space has a platform of some kind, right? So one thing I think is really interesting in OT and IoT security technology is that, in the IT world, you have all these kind of acronyms, you've got XDR, you've got all these things, In the OT space, it's very kind of outcome driven. So, I think a lot of the technology works really well in a platform play because you've got a lot of different, modules or goals, and you kind of can align that with a platform offering, right? So you can pick and choose modules and go along that journey, and that's pretty cool. Obviously you have the huge, large platform players, some of which cover OT security if they've had some acquisitions and they're looking at that, and they're spending a lot of R&D on it. Others are not so much, and you might be better going for one of these smaller platforms. So that's one of the kind of key things that's really changed. Even in the last 2 years, a lot more of the specialists were more point products And now they're integrating it all together. They're adding more things as the market matures, as there's more market demand. So that's something definitely that's kind of one of the key trends as well. And I think it's really interesting to watch it kind of develop. And the other thing is around, I mentioned the predictive side. One of the other things I'm kind of looking at quite a bit is on the compliance side. So how can tooling help with compliance? Like how can we automate more? How can we make it less of a kind of a checkbox and more incorporated into that, risk management strategy going forward. So there's a lot of interesting things for sure.
So what are some best practices or things that you've seen like successful companies using for their IoT and OT security environments?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, kind of everybody's at a different stage of their journey, for sure. And I think starting with kind of like the basics is a kind of a good way forward. For some, for those who are kind of further along in their journey, and I've mentioned the proactive side of things, I think that is really like the future of OT security. I think it's more looking at improving things from a proactive point of view, being able to predict, being really able to understand what an individual vulnerability means to your environment. What are the most effective controls you can put in place, right? So being able to validate those controls is incredibly useful. Being able to incorporate, what controls you have in place, and then bearing that in mind in your risk assessment. So being able to really kind of pinpoint that, I think, is really useful, and would streamlines things a lot more. So that's something I think is kind of the way forward, although not everybody is going to be ready to kind of do those things right now.
Great. So what are you hoping to get out of the conference this week?
Yeah, I mean, I have so many meetings running around. Every year there's more OT and IoT stuff on the floor, so I'll hopefully make it down there and kind of have a look and see what's new. A lot of interesting conversations, so I'll be seeing all the new launches that are coming out, and just meeting people, talking to people. So it's lovely actually to kind of see so many people, and they have so many interesting things to say and sharing ideas, and just kind of being able to do that networking is really lovely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great conversation. Lovely to meet you. And thank you for watching us here at Broadcast Alley on day 2 at RSAC conference. As always, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe.